This meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Madam President, Directors Gokul Gandhi, Jackson, and O'Halloran have asked to be excused tonight. Director Ferguson.
Present.
Director Garcia.
Present.
Director Leonard.
Present.
Director Seamson.
Present.
Director Zomber.
Present.
And President Herndon.
Present.
That is 5 present. We have a quorum. No,
The chair-
6 present. We have a quorum. Thank you. We have a new member.
The chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We acknowledge that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnick rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwa, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohegan sovereign nations remain present to this day. This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Services Building. This meeting is also being broadcast on WYMS Radio 88.9 FM and via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta de la Mesa Directiva de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799 e introduzca el número de reunión 832-0725-4267, seguido por el símbolo de número. Luego, introduzca el código 883149, seguido por el símbolo de número. Nuevamente, para escuchar esta reunión en español, llame al 312-626-6799 e introduzca el número de reunión 832-0725-4267, seguido por el símbolo de número. Luego, introduzca el código 883149, seguido por el símbolo de número.
Thank you. Before we move to our agenda, the chair will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Tawny Harmon, a school social worker at Townsend Street School. Edward Kovacic, a retired principal from Bradley Tech and Trade. Pearlie Malone, a retired teacher from Bayview High School. Peggy Schwister, a retired teacher from Milwaukee Sign Language School. Leahy Sierra, a retired paraprofessional. Dwayne Sinner, a retired school engineer from Bruce School. Gwendolyn Templer, a retired paraprofessional from South Division High School. Gary Wolfgram, a retired school engineer from Hawthorne School. Christine Zess, a retired school kitchen manager from Forest Home Avenue School. Nelson Lopez Correa, a 10th grade student from Hamilton. Xavier Davis, a 9th grade student from Audubon High School. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Each month, the Milwaukee Board of School Directors accepts the public's input both at the committee's meetings and through correspondence submitted to the Office of Board Governance. As this is the regular monthly board meeting, however, in accordance with board rules, the board will not be taking public comment. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictate that all comments, questions, or requests should be directed to the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. Please be respectful of the democratic process adhered to by the board. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone persisting in disrupting this process will be asked to leave or will be escorted from the meeting and not allowed to return. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who've been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Meetings, Agendas, and Minutes page on the MPS website and choosing Online Agendas. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first item is action on the minutes of the special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. The minutes for October 2024 will be presented in December.
Very well. What is the next item?
Madam President, we have one communication from the superintendent. That is the monthly report with possible action of the superintendent of schools. This is an informational item, and although it was noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Will the superintendent please present the report?
President Herndon, members of the committee, board, Eduardo Galvan, interim superintendent. We are thrilled to have completed the third digital district-wide presidential mock election, a collaborative effort between social studies, research, and technology education departments. Students across the district engaged in dynamic lessons about elections and the candidates participating in inquiry-based learning that encouraged them to ask questions, conduct research, and showcase their findings. Educators provided meaningful platforms for exploration, culminating in students casting their vote. Some schools recreated polling sites in libraries, while others hosted Drop Everything and Vote events, allowing students to use their Chromebooks to participate. Congratulations to all the schools that took part in this enriching experience. We celebrated the 30th anniversary of National Parent Involvement Day, expressing heartfelt gratitude to our families for their unwavering support of their children in our schools. Parents, as their child's first and most important teachers, play a crucial role in fostering a thriving school community. This year, 107 parents were nominated as Parent of the Year, highlighting their commitment and contributions from volunteering and serving on committees to supporting learning at home by collaborating with teachers and community organizations. That event took place last night. This auditorium was full, and it was truly a wonderful event to be able to showcase our families and the importance they play in their child's life. So again, thank you to all of them and congratulations. The families of Milwaukee Public Schools are truly the foundation of our district, and we deeply appreciate their partnership in nurturing this generation of scholars. On November 11th, We honored and thanked the brave men and women who served our country. Though this is recognized on November 11th, Think a Veteran Day is every day. Let's show our gratitude for their service and dedication to our nation. November 11th through 15th marked National School Psychology Week, a time to honor and celebrate the invaluable contributions of school psychologists in peace schools and across the nation. This year's theme, Spark Discovery, highlights the significance of their expertise as a science practitioner. School psychologists play a vital role in fostering innovation, building connections, and inspiring fresh perspectives within their school communities. This month, we recognize and salute school psychologists. The Department of Human Resources was honored to receive the Goodwill Talent Bridge Collective Impact Award, recognizing MPS for its exceptional partnership with the agency as well as its outstanding training and hiring processes. This award highlights our commitment to fostering meaningful collaborations and creating impactful opportunities. We were also proud to accept the Wisconsin Policy Forum Salute to Local Government Award for intergovernmental cooperation. This prestigious recognition celebrates the successful collaboration between Milwaukee Public Schools, Milwaukee Area Technical College, and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. This relationship, better known as M-Cubed, demonstrates the power of partnership in achieving shared goals for our community. Before I close, I would like to invite all the board members to Friendsgiving International Teachers Thanksgiving Dinner this Saturday, 5 p.m., hosted at South Division High School. It promises to be a wonderful event in preparation for Thursday. Thank you. This concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Does the board wish to make any comments on this item? If not, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the board clerk, chief officer, Office of Board Governance?
Madam President, there are two communications from the Office of Board Governance. The first communication is our monthly report with possible action from the board clerk, chief officer, Office of Board Governance. This is an informational item, and although it was noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Will the Office of Board Governance please present the item?
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, we have Pat Newdecker from HIA, our search firm that is helping us with the superintendent search, and she is going to highlight the superintendent profile report that has resulted from the focus groups, interviews, and surveys that they did.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm really excited to be back and see all of you again and represent for you what we heard in engaging with your community over the last 6 weeks. This is a tremendous opportunity for MPS and also the greater city of Milwaukee, and I hope you find a very important presentation. I'm going to present to you a summary of the 55-page report that we've prepared for you and presented to the board. The report also contains a one-page abstract, and the report we hope will be published on your MPS website tomorrow in the Superintendent Search tab that your IT department has created. I'd like to read the quotes that I placed on the cover of the report because I think it sets the tone for hopefully what you're going to hear tonight. One person told us this is the most important hire for Milwaukee in a long time. Another person said, you know what, our students deserve the best. Another, we can become the schools our families want. It's time to reimagine MPS, and our diversity is our greatest strength. So with that, I'd like to present the report to you. Let's see if I can. Is it a click? Nope. What would the advance be here? Maybe you can just advance it for me. That'd be great. Thank you. Just to remind you, we are midpoint in our search process. The engagement phase is the part we've just completed, and simultaneously we're doing the recruitment phase. The application phase is open through the end of November. However, I'm somewhat pleased to report to you we have 26 applicants already. We have been recruiting as well as taking applicants from people who find us on your website and on our website as well. 16 of those have complete applications. 2 of them still need reference letters. 7 of them have submitted their names but are working on their applications, and 1 withdrew to take another job. Next slide, please. The engagement phase, if you'll remember from our initial proposal, reached out to many people through the month of October and November. We were able to create 63 individual interviews and focus group contact points. Some of them were done in person, some of them were Zoom sessions. We also presented your online survey in 10 languages. And overall, we had what we would consider a lower participation for a district your size, but truthfully, the participants were very genuine, highly engaged, and very, very interested in the future and success of MPS. A full schedule of everybody we spoke to and all the sessions are included in the appendix of the report. And I'm also pleased to comment that there were more similarities across the groups than there were differences. So I think your community is more aligned with what they believe are your strengths, your challenges, and also what they hope for in a new superintendent. And there's just a little graphic there because we, as you would know, we spoke to parents, community members, staff, teachers, students, the governor, the mayor, the county exec, your foundations in MPS, your business community, your union leaders. It goes on, and the full list is available for you in your profile. Thank you. I'm going to highlight the strengths and the challenges and the attributes. And I must say, writing this report brought me back to my days as a superintendent, where I fully understood that the only way to move to the next place and to keep your organization growing strong is to celebrate your strengths and recognize and address your challenges face on. So I hope you will agree that that's what I'm trying to do and help walk you through. This profile also will be read by all of the applicants, and they see this then as their chance to have a first look at you as MPS. So what did people say are the strengths and what's great? A strong Milwaukee community, and I'll give you some of the comments and words. A progressive community with great potential, citizens who are strongly interested in youth, not only in their education, but in their well-being in growing up in this great city. A desire for MPS to be successful. Milwaukee has also demonstrated financial support for MPS through partnerships, scholarships, foundations, and support for your referendums. All voices expressed a very strong interest in engaging with MPS in the future, and especially being involved in this very important decision. Another strength was noted as your very caring, dedicated staff. And again, this came through loud and clear through all groups, that the students, the parents, the community members view the MPS staff, and this is all inclusive, as being a very dedicated, caring group of professionals. Another great strength was the variety of program options that you offer for students, and also the notion of parental choice. Groups unanimously discussed the numerous programs and cited things like options in the arts, academics, clubs, work experience, languages, and services that are available for students, especially students with special learning needs, to name a few. Additionally, parental choice is seen as a strength in MPS, a positive opportunity to give students and families choices within MPS beyond just their neighborhood school, and that individualization and personalization are appreciated. It was also noted that there are pockets of tremendous success that exist throughout MPS, and that success should be highlighted. And last but not least, diversity was mentioned in all groups as a tremendous strength in MPS and in Milwaukee. Not one negative comment was made. I didn't hear any negativity about the range of cultures and needs and languages that you might often hear in a large urban community. We heard the exact opposite. Everybody saying that the multiculturalism that exists here is a tremendous opportunity to celebrate individual backgrounds and have your students and your families grow up in real-world settings. Without a doubt, diversity was valued. Also on that slide, you'll see the highest scoring items that were on the survey. And of particular note, your survey data aligns with the qualitative we did when we did the interviewing and talked to individual people. So again, comes through loud and clear, engagement with diverse groups, teachers personalizing their learning, and those types of things were very much aligned with what we heard in the interviews. Thank you. And then there are challenges as well. In both sets of in the set of strengths and also challenges, you'll find the complete set of data, kind of a running list of comments from the interviews, and then those were compiled into summaries in the actual report. And from the summaries of all the groups, because they were all asked the same thing, what's great about MPS, what are the challenges, and what are the attributes you're looking for, we came up with themes. And these are the themes that were described as challenges. And I'm going to mention, well, I'll come back to the survey. The first was the organizational structure and alignment. And I think it might be somewhat descriptive to kick off this section with the notion that MPS sometimes is described as a large ship, often without a rudder, afloat in a sea of tremendous issues in education and in urban life. The district was described as sometimes being disjointed, a lack of organizational alignment, and a disconnect between the buildings and central staff. A little editorial comment that is not unique to you. There's always a somewhat of a healthy tension between central office and the buildings of who serves who, but it was mentioned many, many times. Communication and transparency were noted as problems, and there is a perception that there's a gross inequity in the allocation of resources, with some schools and some students receiving considerably more, and that was not true across the whole district. MPS was described as somewhat of a slow-moving, disjointed organization, getting by every day with no real sense of urgency. These are not easy things to hear or report, but they're a summary of what we heard across the interviews. So I think organizational structure and creating a way whereby your operational side of your organization serves your mission and value and purpose is something you would attend to. Another is expectations and accountability. There's a perception that expectations are different across the district. That was noted by all groups, and that clear expectations may not exist. As noted, some schools show tremendous success, but many schools have very, very low performance. Data about student performance is available, yet it is perceived that sometimes it's not used to create consistent improvements. That issue of accountability was raised several times, and unfortunately, it's viewed that MPS may be accepting mediocrity and complacency, and that emerging culture must be changed. Another category is board governance. Board members as individuals are seen as very caring, dedicated, strong individuals who are here for a strong purpose. But as we all know, coming on a board and functioning as a board requires development. And so there was a request that the board works diligently with the new superintendent to really understand board governance and a role as a board member in concert with the role of a superintendent. It was also mentioned that oftentimes it's perceived that the teachers' union has great influence on board and district decisions, sometimes to what is perceived as the benefit of adults, maybe not necessarily kids. The board unfortunately has had to become too involved in day-to-day operations, and that going forward in the future, that should be getting better as organizational structure and leadership is put back in place. In all, the board needs to be developed and accept their role so that they can be proactive and move into that space, not living in the reactive, putting out fire space that they've inherited. And last but not least is the notion of trust and relationships. The support for MPS is still very, very strong and a very strong held value, but trust in the district has declined. Certainly your financial mismanagement issue, low expectations, perceived inequities, and no lack of urgency was addressed as the factors which seem to erode trust in your community. Some believe that your declining enrollment is related to people who are now voting with their feet, moving their children other places. So MPS needs to restore that trust for the families that are currently here, that you and we are all serving, and also families who have left or have looked for something better, and trust restored for the greater Milwaukee community. Additionally, relationships outside of MPS must be rebuilt. And we heard several comments about people in your community who want to engage, want to partner, but either in the past or currently find it very difficult because of too many layers, perhaps the bureaucracy of large organizations. And one person, I think, summed it up directly as saying MPS often makes it difficult for our community to love them. So access and being available and being able to find their way through the organization is viewed as straining your relationships. I'll also call attention to this slide, and you'll see all the data from the survey, but the lowest scoring items from the survey were those 5 listed. Very low score that the district is financially responsible. That did not receive a high score. No transparent communication from the district. Students are not on track to be ready for the next grade or college and career readiness. A low score in belief that the district is heading in the right direction, and a low score on district schools are safe. This is a tough slide to read and to hear. It's painful, but like we said, these are comments from a very, very genuine, caring community, your community, internal and external, who really wants MPS to be better and be stronger. And we all know from all walks of life and jobs that we've had that the only way to do that is to really peel back the layers of these challenges. So we are really working hard to bring you a superintendent that will help you do that, because we know that the commitment and the desire is definitely here. Next slide, please. I'd like to show you 2 line graphs that give you an analysis of some of the survey data. And I bring this to your attention because this shows how your survey results were disaggregated by the groups. If you remember, we had, I think, about 850 participants, which is a strong sample, but it's a small sample for the size, really, of your district. So I would not generalize these results to your full population. However, on this first slide, you can see that your different groups, administrator, certified staff, community member, parents of students, and support staff, have very varying degrees of rating for you as a school district, with the green bubble on the left being your lowest, which would be the administrative, state of the district, the administrative, certified staff, et cetera, and the highest being, the green is the community member. So the score on the state of the district was lowest from your community group, but luckily highest from your student group. And what's interesting is obviously that spread, but this too is not unique to you. We see this in almost every school district, because when you're inside an organization, like a student or a staff or even a parent, you have a better view of what's actually going on. The farther you're removed from the organization, i.e. your general community, you might not have as much of a peek under the hood, if you will. And this is a challenge for all school districts, but it's something to look at in the future. If this perception is reality, then we all need to work hard to make sure we engage with our community so they know the good that's going on. That's what that slide shows. The next slide, again, shows you those little bubbles of your disaggregated data by group. But what's most interesting on this slide is look how tight those little bubbles appear. So your groups, when asked what they're looking for in a superintendent, were more closely aligned. And I think this is very encouraging for you as leaders and also for us in doing this search for you, because we didn't see a lot of variance of different people saying, oh, I want this, or I want that, or we need this, or we need that. We saw much more congruence in how people were responding and what they were asking for. So let's take a look at that. That's the next slide. You know, the list of attributes and characteristics for a leader are endless, but these are the ones that really rose to the top. In your interview and focus groups, a visionary relationship builder, an organizational manager and courageous leader, somebody who can restore the trust and transparency, somebody who comes to you with a student focus for success, and somebody with experience and the knowledge and skills for urban leadership. And the survey data, although the language comes out of the actual survey, is almost identical to what we heard in the focus groups and interviews. So let me give you just a few key phrases there too. That visionary relationship builder was described as someone who can create a common vision, unify the district, drive change, restore trust, and rebuild our district's reputation. I hope I mentioned that earlier, but in the strengths on the first slide, the people who, and many of you, who have grown up in MPS, gone to MPS, live here, have students who have gone here, are so proud of this district and want to see that success continued, but continued for all students in the challenges that we're all facing in education right now. So somebody who can do that is greatly desired. Someone who can encourage, inspire, and motivate everybody to a common goal. That organizational manager and courageous leader is somebody who has to have an understanding of the organizational structure that's required to effectively and efficiently run a large organization like MPS. They must have the ability to conduct an evaluation of current structure and departments, make changes as needed, and make sure that the operational side of MPS is aligned with your mission and the desired outcomes of your district. That the superintendent must be willing to evaluate staff and departments for quality, skills, and impactful performance, and that the knowledge and skills required of this position must be demonstrated. Restoring trust and transparency is related to someone who can be an effective communicator with all stakeholder groups. Someone who, I know that word transparency is used often, but we heard it a lot. Somebody who can create transparent communication. I always find it interesting. We live in this high-tech digital communication world, and yet all organizations struggle with how do we communicate with all our stakeholders. So you're not alone in that. The individual must be a strong advocate, somebody who can bring different groups together for a common success, somebody who can speak with sincerity, clarity, and honesty, and understand the policies and procedures that exist in your district and how decisions are made. This person must be dedicated to student success and possess the ability to structure MPS for that higher performance. They must understand complex organizational and educational environments, be skilled in change management and how to achieve results, and be especially skilled in data-driven practices that ensure that resources will be effectively used for the outcomes you're desiring. And then the knowledge and skills for urban leadership. This superintendent must demonstrate an understanding of the factors which influence student success and provide that evidence that they have that experience and that they have had experience improving learning for all students. The person must understand and engage with community organizations and services for housing, healthcare, nutrition, transportation, all which impact a student's ability to learn. And the superintendent must know how to challenge learners, raise the achievement of your lowest achieving students, and ensure the growth and excellence for students who are already high achieving. The superintendent must be politically savvy, personally invest in Milwaukee, and seek to understand the many dimensions and the decision makers in this large urban setting. And the survey highlighted the same things. One more slide, please. Additionally, people talk to us with great hope, if you will, about this transition phase that you are in and that we are helping you with. And many expressed interest that the conditions that the board must support for this successful transition are also equally important, so we share those as well. A board's willingness to adhere and develop their role of governance and accountability, a willingness to allow a new superintendent to lead, a support for an audit of district operational practices, a clear articulation from everyone on high expectations and accountability for students and their learning, demonstrating a tremendous appetite of hope for envisioning the future of MPS, possibly considering a mentor for the new superintendent during this transition phase, and even considering possibly individual transition teams focused on student success, finance, and community engagement. As I said, that is a somewhat of a brief but hopefully informative summary of a 55-page report that has a lot of data in it that I hope you will enjoy and really take to heart. It becomes a roadmap for you, if you will, when you hire your new superintendent. It gives you a place to start of what your community is asking for, what you need to be celebrating and recognizing, and also the challenges that you and the superintendent will face together. So with that, I'll just highlight again the next steps. Your application deadline, I misspoke. We've encouraged people to apply by the end of November, but your position stays open until a person is hired. So that job posting is always out there. It never closes because we don't know what the next couple months will bring us. But as I said, right now we have 26 interested applicants. So we now are beginning our screening phase, especially now that we have this profile and we have a clearer understanding of what you and your community are looking for. So we will screen the applicants, and we will be bringing that slate to you at your December board meeting on December 17th. Just so the public understands, we usually bring a slate of at least 6 because in Wisconsin, to have a slate of superintendent candidates of 5 or greater allows you to keep the names confidential. Most applicants prefer to have their name confidential in that first round. This is a huge position. They want to meet you and learn from you too before their name is out there. So we will most likely be bringing a slate of 6 to 8, kind of our A list, if you will. But know that you see all the applicants, you see all the candidates, you see all their materials, and you will interview anybody, as many, and whoever you want. We just do the legwork for you in the screening and tell you who we think is the best fit for what your profile called for. And that will happen in December in a closed session. Excuse me. And I know you know that, but I'm saying it for the benefit of the public. The first round of interviews then are scheduled for January. We are organizing a day in the district for the 27th and 28th of January where your candidates, your finalists, probably 3, will be able to engage with stakeholders again. And then you will continue with your final interviews. We'll do formal background checks beyond what we've been able to do up to this point. That will be done in February, and hopefully you'll be able to work on contract negotiations in February and then announce that hire by spring. And we're very excited for you because we have we have great candidates. They're all great folks, but some probably fit your needs a little better and bring with them tremendous experience. There's interest and desire. I would say honestly, the experience level varies. So we'll make some suggestions for you. Last slide, please. I certainly will entertain questions, but first I want to thank you as a board for your dedication, your public, and all your stakeholders for their involvement and their genuine engagement with us, and especially your staff, who were very, very helpful, even if, a phone call after hours and all kinds of things to make sure things were arranged and set up for us and where did we need to be. And we, ran around and met people at different locations too. So I thank you for that. And I would gladly, on behalf of Mike, Richie, and I, entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Newdecker,
Yeah,
for that great presentation, and it was so informative.
good.
Do the board directors wish to make comments or ask questions at this time? Anyone? Director Leonard.
First of all, just I do thank you. I as hard as some of the information is, for those of us that have been in the system for more than half of my life, it is accurate. I would have to concur with pretty much everything on both ends of the scale on that. So, and I was looking at it, and I wrote that down. I said, well, this will give us a roadmap on questions that we're going to ask and look for with the next superintendent. We know it's going to be a challenge, extreme challenge in my opinion, but it has to be done. We involve, in one way or another, we involve over half the population of the city of Milwaukee. So this is no easy task, and it has to be done the right way. So thank you. Thank you very much. I don't have any questions, though. Thank you.
And just if I may, your community is so supportive. I've been in Wisconsin my whole career, so I think I know communities, but I am very, very proud to know Milwaukee because the people that spoke to us are so genuinely interested in MPS being successful. It was very, very reassuring, if you will. The community organizations that are kind of ready to additionally roll up their sleeves and work with you were just ever present. So I think that's extremely positive. And your students talked about they want to have a greater voice in what's happening. And that's very positive, very, those are our next citizens. So good for you for recognizing and respecting their voice as well. But the person that lands here will have challenges. There are challenges in rural Wisconsin. There's challenges in urban Wisconsin. That's the nature of education right now. But I think they'll land in a great environment.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Thank you, Director Ferguson.
Thank you, President Herndon. And thank you for the presentation, too, letting us know what you gathered from your sessions with various individuals from our community. I noticed that you mentioned we have 26 applicants, and I think you said 16 or 13 have completely...
16 their paperwork is complete.
The paperwork is
Yeah,
complete. And the board won't have any knowledge of who these people are until December 17th?
No, actually, and you might need to be brought up to speed on this perhaps, but HYA you have a board portal.
Okay.
So all the information of this search as it unfolds goes in your portal. It's housed on our server. So all the applications are there, all the information is there, and once we know they're complete, they go in there. So you should be able to find 16 of them now. We're chasing down reference letters on 2 of them. We can see 7 names that are incomplete, But yes, you will see that before the actual slate,
Ah.
and we'll make sure you're I'm assuming the others, you're aware of how to get into that portal. If not, we'll make sure we send you a refresher and make sure you get it as well.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Okay. With that, we'll move forward. And again, thank you so much for
And
the
thank you.
presentation.
We'll see you in about a month with more good news, so.
Great, great.
Thanks.
Looking forward to
You
it.
bet.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, are there any other reports or communications from the board clerk?
Yes, Madam President, the next communication from the Office of Board Governance is the monthly report with possible action on legislative activities affecting MPS. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, members of the board. Chris Thiel, Governmental Relations for Milwaukee Public Schools. Coming to this evening, actually with, it's been a fairly active month in terms of updates and what's gone on over the past several weeks. And one of the first things I'd like to highlight is that as we've discussed, and as you know, we are entering that stage of the state legislative session where, one, we're going to have a new session and we're beginning the state budget process. And as part of that process, the state superintendent and other agencies put forward their budget recommendations and requests that will be considered by the governor and the legislature. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that the state superintendent, along with the bulk of her budget, has recommended that we move to a reimbursement rate for special education of 90%, which is crucial in the state of Wisconsin, as we've mentioned before, for any number of reasons. Several people have discussed this in the past, going back over 6 years, when the governor was, or when at that time, the state superintendent, Tony Evers, was running for governor. He talked about being on a trajectory toward 90%, and we talked about making sure that students in public schools receive something close to the same level of support in terms of students with disabilities as do students in private schools, who the vast majority receive 100% reimbursement, and then there's a level that you get to where you receive 90% after that. So very thankful that the state superintendent has shown leadership in putting forward that 90% proposal. And also just want to talk about the fact that there are funds to actually get this done. In the month of November, a couple of reports come out on November 20. One is known as the November 20 report, interestingly enough, and that came out yesterday, from the Department of Administration, where the department estimates, as we enter into this budget season, how much the state has on hand in terms of a surplus and what the budget forecast looks like. And in their report yesterday, they stated that there is a balance of $4 billion as we enter the budget season, with an additional $1.9 billion in what the state refers to as their rainy day fund. So we have $5.9 billion in Madison right now as we embark on the state budget process. And I want to be clear that $1.9 billion that's in the rainy day fund is for a fiscal emergency. But as we talk about the other thing that happened at the beginning of this month, which is that during the election process, we broke the record in the state of Wisconsin for the number of school districts going to operational referendum. The number of questions asked this year alone was, I think, 148. And obviously, we were a part of that. This passage rate for referendum overall in November was 78%. And so what we're seeing is, even though there's this tension that's built into the state budget between property taxes and school funding, that when referenda questions are asked, people continue to support their schools. We also know, however, that there are many districts out there, when you don't pass a referendum, you're in a desperate situation for your students. And as we continue to work with all of our allies to make sure we have a fair funding system, we are working together to get out of the current situation where our funding system's kind of backward, where the state, frankly, doesn't fund schools, ends up with a quote-unquote surplus of $4 billion because of that underfunding. And then we have to go to referenda to support our schools at the local level, which has an impact on property taxes. It's a backward system, And as we all know, as we have property tax bills coming before us in December, people support their local school districts, but they also want to know, why is this happening? Why is this so backward? Why are my property taxes being impacted because of this situation? And we need to move forward in this state budget to get out of this situation once and for all. One of the pieces of the budget puzzle that it's playing out, also, we got a report, and I kind of communicated with some colleagues about November 20 being school levy tax credit day. Because although this seems like a somewhat in the weeds concept, there's something in state law called the school levy tax credit, and because the state legislature gets to write the law, the state has declared that a tax credit is education funding. You can't buy a crayon with this tax credit. You can't heat a building with this tax credit. You can't put fuel in a bus. You can't pay a teacher. You can't educate a kid with a tax credit. And yet, in state law, because they write that it's education funding, it's called education funding. It's not. It's a tax credit. And the reason it's important to kind of lift this out of the weeds and talk about it is because what happened in the last state budget when we heard about, historic funding and $1 billion and all these things, a good amount of that money that was talked about was put into this tax credit. There is over $1 billion, about $1.2 billion of state money that goes into something called the school levy tax credit that is also declared as funding for schools. It's not. Can't buy a crayon with it, can't pay a teacher with it. And so it's problematic for a number of reasons. One, at the state level, there's a lack of transparency to our public about what is actually school funding. If we want to make that $1.2 billion funding for schools, then we should take that, we should put it into the equalization aid fund, and we can actually use it to fund our students. That's one solution. But it has another problem at the local level, which is going to transpire here, it's going to transpire all across the state, because we are in a phenomenon that is at the end of October, as our board did, school districts set their property tax levies. And only after those property tax levies are set, the school levy tax credit, about 4 weeks later, is not mailed to the school district so that we can describe it to our constituents. It is mailed directly from the state's Department of Revenue to the municipality, in our case, Milwaukee, City of Milwaukee. And so even though the levy that you will see, or anybody will see when they open up their property tax bill, and that we set in October, says our levy is going to be $414 million, the reality of what people are paying is $72.3 million less than that. Because there is a school levy tax credit on the back end that is claimed to be education funding, which it is not, because again, you can't pay a teacher with it, can't buy a crayon with it. It's a tax credit, and it doesn't come through in a transparent process so that we can communicate to people that you're not paying $414 million, you're paying $342, which is a much lower number, obviously. And so we are in a communication process because this number is buried in the state budget process, where not only Milwaukee Public Schools, but any district across the state is trying to explain, one, if there's a $4 billion surplus, why are we going to referendum? Two, if this amount that we say we're levying in October is not actually the amount I'm being taxed, why doesn't the state have a more sensible and transparent system? That's a good question, we should. Three, if it's education funding, shouldn't it actually be placed in a fund so that we can use it to fund education? And the answer to all those questions is obviously yes, we should correct this. So I know I bring this school levy tax credit topic up, and it's a somewhat, some might say a wonky issue, but it's embedded in our funding system in a way that harms kids because it misrepresents what's actually going on in our state funding system. The federal government does not recognize the school levy tax credit as funding for education. They will not recognize that, even though that's in state law. So I just want to highlight that and put that emphasis there, because again, and I think we have an opportunity perhaps to speak with our friends at the city, perhaps to talk about, because again, the school districts, this school district, no school district, has the ability under state law to accurately communicate the actual amount that constituents are being taxed. It's only the city that has control over some of those tax documents. So we may be able to engage in a process in the future to clarify some of those things. In addition to that $72 million reduction, roughly $13 million of the levy that this board put forward is actually attributable to the special needs scholarship program. So $85 million of what you see on your tax bill, which you believe is for MPS, is actually, one, you're not paying $72.3 million of it, and two, 13 million of it goes to the special needs scholarship students that are not Milwaukee Public Schools students. So I just want to make that clear. The other thing, oddly enough at this point, is that if in fact the state would move to 100% reimbursement for special education, the price of doing that is right about the same amount of the school levy tax credit, $1.2 billion. So you could, for example, this would have implications, but there are better funding decisions that could be made that could, one, fund our students, and two, do it in a way that actually supports districts across the state. The implications of moving the tax credit into the equalization aid formula probably make more sense, but again, with $4 billion available, the state superintendent's proposal for a 90% reimbursement level is something that is very doable. The other thing that is not so pleasant to report is in this area of special education funding, this, again, a policy piece that's, kind of down there in the weeds a little bit, but there's something in state law called some certain funding, which means we're going to put this much money in the pot, and that's what you get. And there's another thing called some sufficient funding, which means, for example, if you say you're going to fund special education reimbursement at 33%, the state promises to fund that 33% level. Unfortunately, the state does not do that for special education. They do some certain funding for special education. So even though it's been advertised that we're going to have a 33% reimbursement rate for special education, the updated number that we just received this week is that the special education reimbursement rate has now fallen down to 29.16%. We're going backward. We're going backward. So not only is the money there, but making sure you're living up to the promise that you're giving the public and students by making sure it's some sufficient funding is something that must be accomplished in this upcoming state budget. So those are things we're focused on, among others, and just wanted to bring those to the board's attention. The other piece of information that we're working on is with the elections at the federal level. As the board knows, we have good support with the Council of the Great City Schools. We've had a number of conversations over the course of this month looking at the prospects for funding and support at the federal level. And I'm pleased, again, just simply to report that they are there on our behalf and working with districts across the country. One of the things we're working on in the near term is to make sure that the federal FY25 budget gets passed, which at least has level funding for a lot of areas, Title I, special education at the federal level, and a number of other things. So there is incentive, hopefully, for this current Congress to move that forward and get it passed before next year. And the other thing in terms of transparency that I would just want to keep an eye on and help people understand, there has been a term used as we look at what future federal budgets might look like, that the responsibility for some of this funding would be, quote, returned to the states. When you hear that, think, oh, they're going to cut the money. That's what that means. There is no returning to the states from the federal level to the state level. That means the federal government will be cutting those funds. And we talked about this last month with regard to Title I. The state of Wisconsin receives over $220 million to support students challenged by poverty. So when you hear somebody say, we're going to return that responsibility to the states, that means we're cutting that money because there is no returning it. There is no state policy in the state of Wisconsin that supports students challenged by poverty. We used to have SAGE, which is for classroom. But we do not have a dedicated, coherent policy to support students challenged by poverty in the state of Wisconsin. And obviously, therefore, we do not have anything funding a non-existent policy. So I just want to make sure that some of this language is used to bluntly mask what the intentions are here. And just wanted to bring that to the attention of the board and obviously share that with our constituents to make them aware. Now, again, we are going to continue to work with our federal representatives to make sure that funding for students is preserved going forward. We're going to need people's help to do that. We've already reached out to some of our federal level offices, and they remain dedicated to support our students. So even though you may hear those phrases, I think there's certainly interest at the federal level to maintain funding for programs, but it will take effort, and we're going to engage in that. So happy to answer any questions if you have them, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thiel. I can say that he always comes in with so much information. And the fact of the matter is that we don't hear it enough, I don't think, in the community at large, and the community at large doesn't necessarily understand that. I even had some lessons from Mr. Thiel. I wasn't even on the board years ago, and I asked for it, and he provided the information. And then I asked him again, and we went for coffee again. So it's not like anyone is unwilling on the stage, for sure, to provide the assistance needed in the community to make sure that the community understands that, yes, all of this financial stuff is mind-boggling, but at the same time, it's critical for the future of educating our children, and we must pay attention and take action accordingly. Is there anyone else with a statement? Director Simpson.
You practically took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, Mr. Thiel, I appreciate your education funding 101 class that we get every month, and I think it's not only beneficial and helpful to those of us on the stage, but just the listening audience, because it's complicated and there are many layers, and sometimes very misleading information is out there, whether intentional or not. But so I really appreciate you clarifying that for not only us, but the listening public every month. I value that. And I just want to say welcome to the students who just walked in the door as well. Nice to see you here.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Director Leonard.
So I do have some questions, just to get some clarity, and I think I know most of the answers because I've asked you these same questions for 4 years running now. But that's how it works.
That's how we learn.
It's really for the public interest and myself, but I think that, first of all, when I look at, if I look at the 90% prorated amount, MPS would be receiving $108.2 million, or that's how much more we would be receiving. How much of that, how does that work when it comes to the voucher programs? Because we always get, it really, the money funnels through us, one way or the other. So when we're looking at special ed funding, let's just say it's, and I'm guessing the numbers, I apologize for that, but 89% of the, 11% of the special ed students are in voucher schools. It might be less than that, but between 9 and 11% in the city of Milwaukee for our choice program with them. Out of that $108 million, if we could even get that, how much of that goes to, we have to pay them directly. Would that come out of that $108 million?
No. President Herndon, Director Leonard, thank you for the question, because it can be complicated, because I think separating the federal money for students with disabilities from state level funding is key here. Under the federal law, IDEA, our staff, and this happens across the state, public school staff, if a student is referred for potential special education services, our public school staff go out and conduct the interview for that child to see whether or not they need services. And then if they do, they receive, on the private school side, something called a service plan. On the public school side, it's an IEP, or individualized education plan. On the private side, it's called the service plan. And based on the availability of federal funds, there are some services that will be provided with those federal dollars to students in private schools. So that's on the federal side. However, on the state side, when there are two different programs, and one is specific to, so when you're describing kind of the flow through of money and what goes to private school students, that's on that federal side primarily. On the state level, the students, if there's a student, and I think the population, at least in Milwaukee, of students with disabilities in private schools is probably less than 5%, given the information we have, but there's some debate over that. If a school and a parent applies for something called a special needs scholarship, that funding from the state, if a student qualifies, and again, our public school staff will go out, conduct a referral, an IEP will be created, that student will qualify. But that student then gets that money directly from the state in a somewhat complicated way, but essentially in terms of the amount that a student receives, they will get 100% funding up to about $23,000. And then if there are costs for that student beyond that, the state directly reimburses 90% of any costs above that, and it's not exactly 23,000, but above that roughly $23,000 number. So when we describe a 90% reimbursement rate, private school students by and large are getting 100%, because there are, from what we've seen so far, a limited number who are requesting additional funds over that 90% level. So, but those dollars, to your question, go directly to that school to support that school in the private setting. When we talk about the state moving the special ed reimbursement rate for public schools to 90%, or the state superintendent's recommendation, and the estimate that we see is from April, which suggests that we would receive $108 million to cover those costs, those funds would be for Milwaukee Public Schools students. And while this is special education funding, the benefit is for all students, because the state right now is so dramatically underfunding public schools in this area, and because we provide services to students with disabilities, and under federal law, you have to provide services to students with disabilities, each state in school district in the state is transferring money out of its general fund to cover what the state is not funding. So the phrasing here is we would receive $108 million more. The flip side of looking at that is $108 million is being transferred to support kids because the state is failing to do its job. So either way, those $108 million would come to the district to support our students and all of our students.
Very good. So that would be great news if that
Right.
went through. I mean, that would change dynamically the way that we can fund our budgets. There's no question about that. And I can attest to the fact that I remember doing reevaluations and IEPs for private school students on an average of 4 or 5 just from my 2 grade levels. And that just only count second and third grade. So I know that we have to actually do the work, and we really don't get paid for it in many instances. I want to do, for the record, I want to just sort of do some corrections. I've been studying the Project 2025 since probably like June, just to get an idea of what we're headed for, possibly. And I don't think it's as accurate as, I don't think all these things are actually going to happen. I think it's not going to be as easy as some people would assume. But when it comes to education funding, there's inaccuracies even in their own information. So I believe her name is Lindsay Burke from EdChoice, and she talks about the 40% reimbursement rate from the federal government. The federal government doesn't reimburse or give us 40% funding for special ed. In the meeting behind the board meeting, we get like 10.8%. And I just need to have you actually verify. You're nodding your head yes, but so if you can just verify that.
President Herndon, Director Leonard, excuse me, that's correct. I don't have the number in front of me, but the federal reimbursement rate is, I most recently was referring to a roughly 11% figure. So if you have 10.8, that I would affirm that it's at that level. Certainly not 40%. No, when 40%, many years ago at the federal level, when IDEA was created, the federal government said, and we will fund this at a 40% reimbursement rate. That's what they declared that they would do. They're actually reimbursing at 10.8%. So no, they are that far south of what their stated goal is. So yes, we've certainly advocated that the federal government should, and I would give credit to Senator Baldwin and Congresswoman Moore for moving forward legislation. It hasn't passed, but they have moved forward legislation to live up to that promise of 40%. So I think that's where the 40% comes from, but no, they are nowhere near 40%.
Thank you. And then I'll just verify what you said earlier, that when you do read those reports, the idea is eventually to put everything back into block grants for special ed funding and really public education funding, to be honest with you, for any grants. And then within 10 years' time, they want states to pick up that cost. So in essence, you're ending funding of public education, at least from the federal level for sure. And we know at this point in time, the state struggles even with that kind of surplus to give us money that we just need on a regular basis. So I can't imagine in 10 years what that would look like if that actually went through. I mean, you can sort of figure it out in your ideas when you look at 150 schools in Milwaukee Public Schools, and you're taking away that highest percentage of funding. Consolidation wouldn't be a factor. It would be everybody's going to be moving into central office to teach their students. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
Madam President, there is one communication from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. The first report is the monthly report with possible action on activities within the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Chason.
Thank you, President Herndon. Matt Chason, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is before you. Two quick updates related to the corrective action plan. First is that the progress tracker will be updated next week and published the week following, so that the current progress on the CAP will be available for your inspection and for the public. Secondly, we continue to work with our external auditor, Baker Tilly, to make sure that they have all the productive information and responses to their inquiries about the financial statement information that we've shared with them. And that progress is moving forward very well. Tonight, additionally, as part of the audit service update, I've made it a policy with the reorganization of audit services under the OAE to make sure there's a little bit more visibility on the role that they serve, both for the board and for the public. One of the questions that comes up fairly often is when you have an independent audit function, what assurances do you have that your eyes and ears that the policies and procedures that you've adopted have adequate internal controls and there's an adequate assessment of the risk there. And I have our Chief Auditor, Mr. Geib, here to provide you a review of those reviews. Mr. Geib?
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, President Herndon, members of the board, and welcome again to Director Ferguson as well. I did want to just mention before I walk through this slide presentation, a couple of things that were noted in the highlights for this month. We are actually on pace to probably set a record for the number of fraud hotline complaints that we've received. Through October, we had almost 30 complaints. And I wanted to mention that because when we look historically at where we were with those numbers, at this pace, we would be looking at more than two complaints a week. And so as we started the month of July, we saw an uptick. I do have staff that works on these complaints, and next month I'd like to talk a little bit more about that process with you. But tonight, I do want to talk about who audits the auditor. So I did hear, and I appreciated the information that we heard on the superintendent's search. They mentioned some challenges to the district. I'm in my 24th year now in the district, and some of the challenges that I heard her mention for the incoming superintendent were the organizational structure, transparency, and accountability. And what I really want to stress is when we walk through this presentation, those key issues are all part of the ability for the audit to function properly. Next slide. So the Yellow Book is the federal government auditing standards that we follow to ensure that we have met the highest level of quality and independence in our work. In other words, the audit function needs to be outside of the administration because we could be auditing or reviewing an operational area. So the reporting structure as it exists now is that I report to Matt administratively, report to the board functionally. That reporting line allows for the independence of the audit operations. The government auditing standards that I follow require that we have a peer review every 3 years. During that time period, we have an external group of auditors come in from other operational areas of government, and they will review my policies and procedures, my audits and non-audits, including investigations, work papers, and they will interview my staff, and they will also interview members of the board or members of an audit committee that I hope to have up and running at a certain point. The slide that we're looking at here, that's a nice picture, by the way, of the Comptroller General. That's Jean Dordero. In case you were wondering who that was. It's not me 25 years ago. I just want to read this information for you. These peer reviews are performed every 3 years to ensure reasonable assurance with the standards. What that means is that the team that comes in has reasonable assurance that my team is complying with all of the requirements that we are saying that we're following when we issue these audits or investigations. I have requested our next peer review, which will be scheduled for the March-April 2025 timeframe. That keeps me, next slide please, that keeps me on target for having my review every 3 years. The last peer review that we had conducted was in April of 2022, and that's up on the screen. Hopefully, you've received that report as well as the prior two peer review reports that I provided to Board Clerk Dr. Owen Moore to transmit to you. I think I did that at the end of October. I know that's a little hard to read. I apologize for that. I'm not trying to obscure anything. That was a pass opinion with no management letter comments. So essentially, they lay out in that opinion, here's what we did, here's what we looked at, here's what we concluded. That is the fourth peer review in a row that our office received the highest level of assurance, which was a pass opinion with no management letter comments. And I can tell you from serving on the peer review committee for the Association of Local Government Auditors that we're one of the very few shops in the country that has that track record. Next slide, please. Now, the crux of this slide here is to give you, the board, the information to hopefully make it clear that the independence requirements are fundamental. In other words, fundamental to a successful peer review is assurance that the audit function has full independence to conduct audits and investigations. Threats to independence, per the Yellow Book, and there are certain sections of that Yellow Book that talk about independence, but threats to that or impairments to independence include obstruction of information requests, interference in obtaining relevant records, documents, personnel, and undue influence on the direction of the audits and investigations. So I can't say I follow government auditing standards with the exception of independence. I would fail that. So this peer review process, again, when we talk about the peer review process, it's a team of auditors that come from, it's an all-volunteer Association of Local Government Auditors Association. They come in, and I'm encouraging you as a board, when they are here, to participate in their interview process. This will actually be my 7th review since I've been with Audit Services. We started following the standards back in 2002, 2003, and the first peer review happened in 2006. They've all been pass opinions, but again, the last 4 have been pass opinions with no management or comments. What I want to leave you with is that Board Policy 2.12. That policy has been in place since 1995. That policy not only gives me the independence to conduct my work, but it gives me the authority. Again, when we're talking about transparency and accountability, my peer review reports are put on the website, the OE website. They're there for anyone to see. If we had adverse opinions, they'd be still put out on the website for anyone to see. Happily, we don't. But we are looking to strengthen 2.12. And, to do that in an LRP meeting that's noticed with the link available to review that policy and those changes and invite public comment. So the intent is to bring a policy forward to you that actually further strengthens the independence of the audit function. And that is the last slide. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And if I may, Chair Herndon, Mr. Guy mentioned earlier that we actually presently on pace to set a record with the number of concerns that have been received in the office. And I personally, I think I'll speak for Mr. Gabb, I think that's a good thing. I think that speaks to a culture shift in which staff feel comfortable sharing their concerns. I know that could be received as, it's a negative thing, there's more complaints, but I think Paul and I both feel that's actually a positive thing for the culture in the organization. So I just wanted to share that as part of the data point that he shared earlier. With that, happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or concerns or comments? Director Garcia.
Thank you for that report. I found it to be very enlightening to see that, when we think about audits, the fact that there's a peer review group of folks that comes together to look at, all things of functioning. I guess my question is more to you, Mr. Gabe, in terms of, threats that you feel would impede the independence. I was just wondering if you can give us some examples of what would that look like? What are things that us as board members, we really should be on our radar in regard to this is becoming a threat to independence of adequately doing an audit?
President Herndon, Director Garcia, members of the board, I think I forgot to mention my title and name, Paul Geib, Chief Auditor, OE Audit Services. That's a great question, and I'm happy to answer that. So I will give an example. If I'm conducting an audit or investigation and I'm looking to receive relevant information for that particular audit or investigation, I have to have the opportunity to be able to request that information, for instance, directly from our technology department. If we insert other operational areas into that request, now we've potentially impeded the ability for me to actually obtain information that could potentially be obstructed or destroyed or delayed. So for instance, the way this is operated in the past is that with 2.12, I have full, free, and unrestricted access to all relevant records, documents, and personnel. tweaking that language to insert other operational areas that I might actually have to audit or have to investigate, inserting another area like that could in fact then impede my independence, because that other operational area could then decide that there are certain records that may or may not be allowed to be provided to me. We're not talking about, though, I do want to make sure we're clear that there are going to be certain situations where there might be, for instance, privileged or confidential information. Okay. Now, in other audit shops around the country, and again, I've been on the AUGA peer review committee myself for about 15 years now. In other audit shops, they have situations where they have policy that talks about unfettered access to those records and allows for an independent outside legal counsel to review whether or not records like that should or should not be released. But that's a situation, again, where if we're talking about transparency here, everything that we do as a district, decisions we make, should be able to have a spotlight shined on them and be defensible. In my view, again, in my 24th year here, and I heard it from the consultant tonight, there's a perception that we are not transparent, that there's lack of trust, that we have organizational structure challenges. I'm just here to tell you that, look, I've been doing this 24 years. I want to see the district succeed. I follow government auditing standards to ensure that I do have the highest level of independence and integrity. So I do take it seriously. I think it's something the board should take seriously too, in terms of whether there could be threats to the independence of the audit function, whether there could be impairments to the audit function. Because the message then that sends is that, you know, the independence of the audit function may not be as important, and that I would hope that wouldn't be the case.
Director Zomber.
Thank you, Chair Herndon. I also, too, found this presentation informative. I think I've also noticed a difference from when I first got on the board with the shift to have audit under OAE. I think we've seen more transparency about the audits. We've been discussing in AFP audit results. We've been able to have more engagement. And then that's the opportunity for the board to bring forward kind of those like day-to-day operational concerns that we're seeing. So instead of us like putting out those fires on our own, we're able to say, hey, let's add this to the audit plan so that they can do the investigation, they can do the research, they can work with administration to come up with the recommendations, and we can start fixing these problems. So I think it's just for any future superintendent candidate listening to this meeting tonight, I think having that independent audit structure that can do that work and help improve the operations of the district is something that I think us as a board really wants to support, and hopefully we can continue to do that more, and that I hope that in March we have an excellent peer review. So thank you so much. I do have, well, you already answered Mr. Ferguson's question about who is in the man in the PowerPoint in the picture, so thank you for that. And this, can you just explain a little bit about what's the alternative to the Yellow Book? Like what's unique about the Yellow Book auditing standards? Why do we use those standards?
President Herndon, Director Zomber, members of the board, there are really two different government auditing standards or auditing standards that are followed in the audit world. The Yellow Book is the Government Accountability Office's standards for quality audits. The other standards are what are called the Red Book. We like our colors. So we actually have some Orange Book shops that actually will follow both standards. But the Red Book is that is usually followed more by kind of professional private audit shops. But there are, in my experience, about 85% of government audit shops follow Yellow Book. Now, there are some audit shops that have a mandate in their charter or their policy that they are mandated to follow those government auditing standards. And that's something that we would like to bring forward in our 2.12 policy as well. You do have some government auditing shops that don't follow any standards. The reason that we went down the road of following those standards back in the early 2000s is because we were looking to have a higher level of assurance when we perform our audits that the board and the public has confidence that we followed these kind of what I'm going to call like the gold standard of standards to be able to conduct our work. One thing I'll say too is regarding those standards is that they actually have another version of the Yellow Book that will be coming out effective December 2025. So they go through iterations of updating standards, and then we will update our policies and procedures to comply with those standards. Some would actually say we're building a better mousetrap, but
Very much. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, seeing no one. Madam Secretary, what is the next item of business, please?
Madam President, the next item is action on reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, student expulsions.
The chair will entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the reports of the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. Director Simpson.
I move that we accept the report of the independent hearing officers.
Thank you. Could we have a second? Director Leonard.
I second.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director Simpson's motion to approve the report of the independent hearing officers, Director Ferguson,
Aye.
Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Director Zomber,
Aye.
President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
We will now have the reports of the standing committees. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not be given public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 1, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited-term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of the administration. Item 5, action on monthly facilities matters, FMS award of professional services contracts, and material purchase recommendation is set aside as it was forwarded to the board without recommendation.
Thank you. Do board members wish any other items to be set aside for the report? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The report of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do board members wish any items to be set aside? Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
Report of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
Report of the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Item 11, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy and Procedure 7.37, graduation requirements, has been set aside at the request of Director Zomber.
Do board members wish any other items to be set aside? May I please have a motion to approve the balance of the committee reports? Will the secretary please call the roll after we get the motion? Director Simpson.
Wait, I move that we accept the balance of the reports from the standing committees.
Director Garcia.
I second that.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Simpson's motion to approve the balance of the reports of the standing committees, Director Ferguson,
Aye.
Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Director Zomber,
Aye.
President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is the first item set aside?
The first item set aside is from the report of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 1, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited-term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of the administration. This item was set aside at the request of the administration.
Thank you. Does the administration have new information to present at this time?
President Herndon, members of the board, Eduardo Galvan, interim superintendent, the administration requests your approval of the revised attachment for this item. I have with me Adrienne Maddaleni to outline those revisions. Thank you. Ms. Maddaleni.
Thank you, Mr. Galvan. President Herndon, members of the board, Adrienne Maddaleni, Chief Human Resources Officer. We had to make a correction to one of the LTEs. We had to correct their hourly rate, so that's why we're bringing it forward tonight for your approval.
Thank you. Do board members have any questions or comments? What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item? Director Garcia.
I move that we accept administration's revised recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases, decreases, and limited-term employment contracts exceeding 60 days.
Thank you. A second, please. Director Simpson.
I'll second.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Garcia's motion to approve the administration's recommendations as presented on the revised attachment, Director Ferguson,
Aye.
Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Director Zomber,
Aye.
President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
Thank you. Before we move to the next item, on behalf of the chair, we wish to congratulate all individuals who were presented for appointment, promotion, reassignment, or reclassification. We appreciate your dedication to the MPS community, and we wish you success in your new role. Let's share in a round of applause for this month's appointees. Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is the next item set aside?
The next item set aside is also from the report of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 5, action on monthly facilities matters, FMS award of professional services contracts, and material purchase recommendation is set aside as it was forwarded to the board without recommendation.
Thank you. Does the Office of Accountability and Efficiency have any comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair Herndon. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. So on Tuesday, one of the vendors that was being brought forward for recommendation for award was non-compliant in terms of their supplier diversity, contract requirements, and their historically underutilized business requirements. That vendor has provided and demonstrated satisfaction towards many of the compliance goals since then with acceptable remediation plans as well. And we have no reason at this time not to move forward with this administration recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the administration have anything to add?
President Herndon, we have nothing else to add at this time.
Do board members have any questions or concerns, comments? What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item? Director Simpson.
I move approval of this report.
And the second
Yes.
is needed. Director Garcia?
Second?
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
For clarity, is that moving approval of the professional services contracts and approval of the material purchase?
Thank you. Yes, I was looking for that language and couldn't find it fast enough. That is exactly what I meant.
Thank you. On Director Simpson's motion to approve the action on monthly facilities matters, FMS award of professional services contracts and material purchase recommendation, Director Ferguson,
Aye.
Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Director Zomber,
Aye.
President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the next item set aside? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong page. Do we have any items of regular business?
Nope, I think you had it right the first time. What is the next item set aside?
Oh, we do?
The next item.
Oh, sorry about
That's
that.
okay. The next item set aside is from the report on the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Item 11, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy and Procedure 7.37, graduation requirements, has been set aside at the request of Director Zomber.
Director Zomber, would you like to speak on this item?
Yes, thank you, President Herndon. Since the LRP meeting, the board's still been getting some questions about this policy, and so I just wanted to pull it so we could have a little bit more additional discussion and get some questions answered from administration before approving the policy change. So this particular policy is regarding approving revisions to graduation requirements, and specifically the questions are around the alternative pathway for students that would qualify. Let me see if I can just find so it's the policy and procedure. So I guess one of the questions, currently I believe, well, one of the questions is around a grade proficient or better in all courses. And the concern is, could a basic or better, could the policy be amended for basic or better? Currently, I believe all alternative curriculum classes are recorded as pass-fail according to IEPs, and alternative achievement standards set forth by DPI. So there's a fear that current students wouldn't be eligible unless they have 4 years left and are not working on transition goals. I have some additional questions, but could the administration just talk about the one piece of what would it mean to amend the new policy that's being proposed, or the changes to the policy that's being proposed to change that alternative pathway from proficient to basic?
Administration.
President Herndon, members of the committee, board, Eduardo Galvan, interim superintendent. At the November 12 LRP meeting, the administration presented policy 7.37 and the committee passed the item. Since then, as has been stated, the administration has been asked to share a summary of the information to answer some of those questions. I have here with me Dr. Hill and Dr. Pinter to share some of those answers and information.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. President Herndon, members of the board, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. So to go over the how we got to the proficient rating, just a bit of review, but we, in taking in all of the input that had to go into consideration over the last couple of years for this policy change, we looked at what several other cities with similar demographics were doing. We looked at the standards through DPI, and in those cases, what we found, especially for cities of 50,000 or more enrollment, which obviously would match ours, other urban cities in the United States, that every single one of them had a certificate of some kind for their alternate curriculum students. And so we didn't want to do away with it altogether. We recognized the need there, and frankly, that has a lot to do with the size of our enrollment, so the number of students we'd be having cross the stage, and the sort of added layers of scrutiny on those large urban environments and our graduation rates overall compared to some other districts that are smaller and frankly deal with this a little bit differently. So having said that, we proposed a solution where we would keep the certificate for students for which it applied, but then provide an alternate pathway. I should use a different term so we don't keep using alternate, an additional pathway or option, which would be for that diploma. And it was made clear by all the folks who were proponents of it that they wanted an actual diploma. We weren't interested in having a diploma that was a special diploma because that's essentially just a certificate by another name. So for it to be an actual diploma, we then arrived at how would we have that standard different from the standard we had for certificates. And so that's how we arrived at proficient. If we were to bring that standard down, you're essentially just making the standard the same as the current certificate and just doing away with that. And that's not what we were proposing to do. And in fact, we didn't see a good example of that anywhere. So our proposal was to provide a way of differentiating that, to reiterate that proficiency level is based a lot and the essential elements on increased independence and increased ability to work through that particular standard more and more independently, which is what we're working on with these students in particular, vocational skills and independence more than anything. And a reminder that that standard is also, through the state, named the essential element because it's literally the essential element of that core standard. And so we really want them to be proficient in this piece that is, made a comparison on Tuesday to a couple standards, is quite different than our Common Core standard. So it's in a different category, and we definitely want proficiency in it, is the reasoning.
Thank you. Follow up?
Thank you, President Herndon. So, I mean, is it accurate the way the policy is being proposed that, because part of the concern is that the students in the alternative curriculum classes right now, they're being recorded as pass-fail. So is it going to take 4 years before this will be eligible for some students? Or will all students be eligible for this and there will be some way to adjust for that when the policy begins next school year, if passed as proposed?
Administration.
Chair Zomber, President Herndon, members of the board, yes, it would be going forward in order to get these credits. Per the description I just gave, it would be impossible to go backward and to account for courses already completed because the pass-fail isn't specific enough for us to know the level of rigor of that pass-fail. It's a very different standard that would still be maintained for on this scale, but would maintain for students in the certificate track. For the diploma track, we would absolutely need to take that information going forward. It was something considered, and really the only way if you're going to change a graduate diploma policy is going forward to collect the credits. There's no way to go back, given our change to the metric.
And
Any follow-up?
Thank you, President Herndon. And so that would be the same reason why we wouldn't start this January of 2025? Okay. And then let's do one more question around right now the policy being proposed, the revision to the policy states that a certificate of completion cannot be awarded to students in 4 or 5 year graduation cohorts. One of the questions that we're getting is people are wondering if we can amend that to certificate of completion can be awarded to students anytime after completing 4 years when documented within the IEP team meeting 1 semester prior to their expected completion date with graduation cohorts.
Administration.
Director Zombor, President Herndon, members of the board. A certificate of completion means the student has completed a program, and that program is 7 years. So to award a certificate prior to completing the program, they really haven't completed it. The certificate of completion is only available to students that are using the alternate, the curriculum aligned to the alternate achievement standards, or English language learners who essentially age out. So as we said on Tuesday, students have up to 7 years, or the semester they turn 21, to earn a regular diploma. And so we will have some English language learners who are new to our country. They're coming in at maybe 20 years old. So they are eligible to get this certificate of completion. But in terms of the students that are working on the alternate achievement standards, they really need to complete the program, which is 7 years.
Any follow-up?
No, that was helpful information to have. Thank you.
Director Leonard.
So just to make that clear, because there's enough coursework that they have to require time-wise that it takes 7 years. Am I understanding that correctly?
Administration?
Director Leonard, President Herndon, members of the board, yes, there are lifetime courses that the students take in order to work towards some level of independence. So that's why they're on this alternate achievement standard as opposed to the traditional diploma, which is using the Common Core state standards for all of the different academic areas.
Thank you.
Any follow-up?
No, I just want to make sure I understood it correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have additional comments at this time? What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item?
I move that we accept the recommendations from administration on this. I'm trying to remember what policy number it is. I apologize. I think policy number 7.37. Thank you. I guttered through that. Sorry.
Director Garcia?
Second?
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Leonard's motion to approve revisions to Administrative Policy and Procedure 7.37, graduation requirements, Director Ferguson.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
And President Herndon.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, do we have any items of regular business?
Madam President, there are 2 items of regular business. Reports of board delegates. Item 1 is the reports of the board's delegates. Report of the board's delegate to the District Advisory Council.
So that report is before you. So if you have any questions, you may ask me. I will add that the DAC will be involved, directly involved with our community safety meeting that will be held on December 10th after the PACE meeting. So we'll be promoting that. I've been working with Dr. Owen Moore and Christy Stone and Daryl Hall to put this together. We should have information pretty much ready to go out by tomorrow, if I'm hoping for. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What is the next report?
The next report is the report of the board's delegate to CISA 1.
The report is before you. Please contact Director O'Halloran with any questions, as she's not here tonight, and it's posted on the website. What is the next report?
The report of the board's delegate to WASB.
We have Director Garcia here.
Yes, so we had a board meeting 2 weekends ago. So minutes will be shared and uploaded to that report. But I also just wanted to take a quick moment to thank Mr. Dan Rossmiller, who met with us prior to the beginning of this meeting as a regional meeting. So just touching base on all things WASB and looking forward to what 2025 will bring, for us through our involvement with them. So thank you.
Thank you. Do any other delegates have a report? Seeing none. Madam Secretary, what is the next item of regular business?
Monthly report of the President of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. I'll pass it
Thank
to
you, Madam Secretary. The report was turned in, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Madam Secretary, is there any unfinished business before the board?
We have no items of unfinished business.
Madam Secretary, let's see here. Are there any items of new business for referral to committee?
No, Madam President, we have no items of new business.
Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
No, Madam President, we have no communications.
Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral?
No, Madam President, we have no resolutions for referral.
Madam Secretary, are there any other items of business on our agenda?
Madam President, that was the last item on our agenda.
There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned.